In the not-too-distant past, I made a video discussing how the 1998 Cats movie was filmed and used Starkid as an example of how it could have been done differently. Now, at the time I made that video, I hadn't watched Starkid's latest musical, Black Friday, because I'm bad at time, I guess. However, I was interested to learn that for Black Friday, Starkid actually employed some more elaborate filming, not dissimilar to Cats. Neat. And at first, that's where the thought process ended, but then I heard some of the songs for Black Friday and decided to actually give it a watch, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and here we are now. Now, I like Starkid a lot. They make comedy musicals, which I think are really engrossing and entertaining. Their comedy, acting, and music are top tier. And beginning in 2018, Starkid started something big. The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals is the first show in a series of horror-themed originals, all taking place in a town called Hatchetfield. A town in a sort of Twilight Zone situation where terrors are more likely to show up. And it also might be in a time loop, but I don't know. The Hatchetfield series is an ongoing and intertwined narrative, and compounded with the show's horror theme, The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, Black Friday, and the rest of the shows to come are really unique. There really hasn't been a series of musicals like this before, and I want to commend Starkid for their eternal drive to push the boundaries of musical theater. But what got in my head so much to prompt me to make a review of the show? What actually happens in Black Friday? Well, a lot. Tom is a war vet with PTSD trying to make his son happy by buying him toys, because Tom feels responsible for his wife's death. And also there's Lex and her boyfriend who are planning on running away to California with Lex's little sister, Hannah. Hannah is a super special Stephen King magic kid who has an imaginary friend named Webby who probably connects her to other universes or something. And also Tom's old high school girlfriend, Becky, is here, and she's dealing with how she murdered her husband because he abused her, all while the mall goes into a riot over a new line of toys. So yeah, that's a lot, and I haven't even mentioned the cult, the Lovecraftian other dimension, or the President's arc. This show is jam-packed with stuff despite only being 2 hours long, so I think it's high time we actually start going through the show in detail already. The show opens on ominous ticking as we enter the stage in the show's opening number, the Wiggly jingle, an in-universe ad for the new hit toy that's sweeping the nation.
He's a wiggly stick and a stickly wiggly, yeah! Friendly when that makes you giggly.
I think this is a super fun introduction to the show. It's a catchy song that sets up our main antagonist, Wiggly, in a quick and easy way. Not only explaining Wiggly's backstory of being an underwater creature from out of this world, but also setting up the initial goal for our protagonists. Get one on Black Friday. From there, we transition to the protagonists of the previous show, Paul and Emma, driving. It's established that they're driving to Emma's brother-in-law's house. Her sister is dead, but her nephew is still around, and her sister's old husband has invited the two over. Emma is determined to spend more time with her extended family after blowing off her sister too many times before her untimely death. And this scene kind of acts like an encapsulation of the show's issues as a whole. The show sets up Paul and Emma in a way that feels like they should be the stars for this show. Paul doesn't like the Wiggly jingle, meaning he could be immune to the mind-bending powers of the toy, setting him up as the perfect person to save the day, just like how was done in the previous show. And Emma's been established with a personal goal. She lays out her intention to get closer to her family and is given a conflict with the realization that Tom has really asked the two to simply babysit for a bit. But these two are not part of the story. Why do we spend 10 minutes establishing the plots of two characters who aren't participating in the show? Black Friday is technically a sequel to The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, but you don't need to watch the previous show to understand Black Friday's plot. It's a standalone story, and yet this whole beginning scene feels less like it's setting up our protagonist Tom, and more like it's lingering on the cast from a different show that people liked. These two are funny. I like the scene in concept, but it just ends up feeling like we get stuck with the third wheel nobody as the plot that just got established, Emma reconnecting with her family, gets left behind. Simply spending less time with Paul and Emma and not giving her such a steadfast goal in mind, making the focus of the scene Tom instead, would have helped a lot. Anyway, the scene finishes with What Tim Wants. This song really does the legwork on getting the audience invested in Tom, laying out his internal struggles of dealing with PTSD, his late wife's death, and how he feels he needs to make it up to his son. It sounds great, which shouldn't be a surprise. Dylan Saunders is an excellent singer. The flash bang parts are especially cool, as it sort of mixes all these together in an elegant way.
Do I ever get that one flash bang son? Flash bang, what have I done?
Finishing his song, Tom makes it to the mall where he bumps into an old student of his, and another main character of our tale, Lex, a dropout who works in Toy Zone. These two have a really fun chemistry, acting less like a father-daughter relationship and more like old work buddies. Having these two be the heroes who save the day with their combined apathy and snarky remarks would make for a really entertaining time.
I always thought you had a great work ethic.
Yeah, well, if I don't support my drinking habit, who will?
Yeah, that's funny. Listen, Lex,
Which makes it a shame that these two barely interact. Despite both playing primary roles in the show, their stories don't really intertwine. They feel isolated from each other for most of it, and I just don't see why the decision was made to keep our protagonists so distant from each other. We then get introduced to a minor antagonist, Lex's boss, Frank Priceley. He doesn't have a lot of stage time, but his overt greed and delight in getting at people's money makes him a treat every time he's on stage. Like, he's an asshole, but also such a ham that you can't help but smile along with him. Lex steals a Wiggly doll and we get introduced to her boyfriend, Ethan, and her sister, Hannah. These three jive together real well. All of them are likable and feel natural around each other. Even Hannah doesn't feel left out despite not really being part of the plan and her magic space condition thing. I also dig the hints and foreshadowing in the scene that you get to appreciate on a second viewing. Hannah's reasons for not wanting to wear the backpack and in turn carry around the Wiggly doll hint at the rioters, General McNamara's mentor, and the alternate dimension Wiggly comes from. And it goes even further with Ethan's promise that his hat can protect her.
Honest?
Cross my heart. Hope to die.
The song California MIA starts up, and it's fine. I can't say it's a bad song, it's just not really my thing. I do like how it continues to make me root for the two.
Cause I've had practice selling hope. That's not how cameras work, baby. And when
Lex and Ethan may be punks, but they're lovable ones. Though, if you want to have the most fun with this song, you'll pay attention to Hannah in the background killing it. I actually want to take a second to discuss the performers. Now honestly, there is no weak link here in the cast. Everybody's giving it their all and doing a great job. Jokes all land, emotional beats hit hard, and musical performances are at the same professional level Starkid's been operating at. I do want to note the newcomers to the Starkid team though, especially Kendall Nicole playing Hannah, who was actually 13 during the show's production. She stands on equal footing with her older castmates and does a stellar job with not only singing her solo later, but also acting for such a layered character. Angela Giratana, I hope I pronounced her last name right, has excellent chemistry with the rest of the cast, feeling just as home with the Starkid team as John Madison did in his first show. James Tolbert has been with the team for a while as their choreographer, and his first onstage appearance here is just as fun as the dances he conducts. Kurt Mega and Kim Whalen have been close to Starkid for years, but this is their first time actually being in one of their shows, and these two should absolutely become staples of the team. The two are clearly professionals, completely immersing themselves into the characters they portray, and Kim specifically has the cleanest, most confident vocals of the cast.
Lovely girl, lovely girl.
But like I said, the whole cast does great for the show, which gets to be put on display in the next scene, as we get introduced to our primary antagonist, Linda Monroe. Similar to Mr. Priceley, Linda is a lovable and hateable villain at the same time. Lauren Lopez balances Linda's conceited, haughty attitude and her temperamental, childish behavior masterfully. You hate her, but love it whenever she's on stage. She bounces between being absolutely vile and genuinely funny talking to her husband Gerald on the phone in a way that keeps you invested in whatever she has to say.
And that's why you disgust me. Well, not because you're so naive. Because you're so weak. Stop crying, Gerald! I wasn't talking to you!
And with Linda's inclusion, we also get introduced to Becky, another primary member of the cast. Their discussion on how it's not fair for Linda to cut in line does a good job not only establishing the two's rivalry, but also lets us see how Becky is a near perfect foil to Linda. Becky is caring and empathetic, willing to help others, to the point that she could be seen as a doormat. And with this lineup for Toy Zone, we begin the objectively best scene and collection of songs for the show. This is not an opinion, it's fact. No, I'm not taking questions at this time. It's really not the biggest hot take to say the part where we see customers trying to do their shopping on Black Friday, in a show called Black Friday, the best part. The energy and atmosphere while in the mall is engrossing and really pulls in the audience, something that wasn't really happening in earlier scenes. Until now, we've just been setting up the cast, but with Toy Zone's opening coming up, the real show gets to start. Tom barges past a bunch of people to try and jump ahead in line, coming face to face with Becky, his old high school sweetheart, an event that the whole line of extras fill us in on with What Do You Say? Having the others explain all this with a song keeps the lead's backstory exposition entertaining, while also allowing the audience to get invested in the rest of the chorus. For example, this guy isn't just the guy with a hat, he's one of the main gossips who was invested in Tom and Becky's reunion. It also lets the romance between the two blossom, or rather, re-blossom, in an expedited way, as the others work to push the two back together during the loosey-goosey musical logic of the song. Also, it's funny as shit.
It's cold out.
Oh, nothing really.
How are things?
Haven't seen it.
Oh my god, it's a train wreck!
Toy Zone opens as we immediately transition into Our Doors Are Open. This song isn't doing the same legwork as What Do You Say when it comes to characterization or exposition, but it fucking slaps. Corey Doris is killing it with his vocals.
Humble the scope and grand door when our doors thrust open. Traveling is part of the allure. Yes, our doors are open to you.
This song is primarily aiming to be entertaining, and it's one that I go back to listen to the most. We get properly introduced to Sherman, a minor character who intends to buy all the Wiggly toys. On the topic of Sherman, I've heard that he's an incredibly unliked character amongst the Starkid fans, many of whom wished he wasn't in the show. I wonder if those people understand that you're not supposed to like Sherman? Not only is he kinda just a weirdo, but he also initiates the main conflict. Sherman intending to buy out the stock prompts the other shoppers to behave recklessly and desperately. Not all antagonists are as likable as Linda, you know. And personally, I really like how Jamie Lynn Beatty performs Sherman. Weird enough without being outright creepy.
I will tickle one doll, and one doll will tickle me.
Gary Goldstein, attorney at law, makes his proper introduction as he jumps to both Linda and Sherman's aid. Tensions rise as people argue over how many Wigglies one should be able to buy, some try to override the line by bidding on the Wiggly, and all hell breaks loose with the start of my favorite song from the show, Feast or Famine. This song is a riot, literally. It's choreographed chaos, encapsulating the rising level of violence amongst the shoppers in their desperation to obtain their Wigglies. The choreography is awesome, as it blends fight choreo and dance choreo to give the scene a level of comprehensive disorder. The choreographer, James Tolbert, does an excellent job for the whole show, but truly knocks it out of the park here. I especially like the song's backing music. It sells the feeling of pandemonium. We cut away from the chaos to catch up with Ethan and Hannah trying to get into a movie in what is one of the funniest interactions I've seen.
$30 for 2 tickets. That's... Look, I'll give you $15. That's as high as I'm going.
Sir? Okay, this is not a type of place where you can haggle, sir.
The two aren't able to get into the movie, but they do have a heart-to-heart. This scene really solidifies Ethan as a likable, nice character, which is good because he doesn't have much screen time before his death. The way he interacts with Hannah here is why I was sad about his death. It may not have been much screen time, but it was used well, I say. Gary and the gossip with the hat barge in and are bad news. Ethan instructs Hannah to hide as his assailants beat him to death. I think now might be a good time to talk about the show's genre. So like I mentioned earlier, it's a horror comedy specifically, and that's a really difficult combination to work with. However, not impossible, and Starkid have already proven they can pull a horror comedy off with the guy who didn't like musicals. Now, I think on a technical level, Starkid have succeeded here. Black Friday is horrific and yet also comedic. However, I find myself hard-pressed to call it an outright comedy, like how I would for its predecessor. I think a more accurate description would be to call it a horror that's just also real funny, which sounds like I'm being pedantic, and yeah, I kinda am, but I think this distinction matters. You expect a more lighthearted show when you expect a comedy. People died during The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals too, but aside from 1.5, they were all played for laughs.
Oh my god! His brain fell out!
The horrors of Black Friday aren't. Regardless of what specific location you should categorize Black Friday under on your movie shelf, I do still think they balance the comedy well in this show. And hell, one of the funniest gags of the show happens as Tom and Becky find Ethan. Despite the boy's death, Tom is determined to get a Wiggly doll, and he's not the only one, as the guy who's always in a hurry stabs Tom before grabbing the toy and running. Elsewhere, Linda comes across Uncle Wily, who pretty easily convinces Linda to become Wiggly's mother, successfully establishing what the villains want, for Linda to birth Wiggly, but not really what that actually means. Even more elsewhere, far off in the White House, we get introduced to the president, Howard Goodman, and his companions. They are discussing the events of the day, but it seems Wiggly's powers reach much further than the mall as the group fall apart in a bid on who should keep the doll. I like that the scene shows us just how big this problem is, taking a moment to pull out of the Hatchetfield Mall to see the Oval Office falling apart for Wiggly makes this problem feel big and important. And I would also be remiss to not mention James Tolbert's amazing Obama impression.
Now, I know this may sound hard to believe, but it seems that what these people are riding over is a doll.
And then General McNamara makes his introduction. He's a returning character from The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, which is why the audience goes ballistic upon his entrance. I don't mind McNamara returning with his X-Men Secret Service crew, as he and his team of people studying and fighting against otherworldly forces is a great through line for the Hatchetfield series, a constant across the shows that help them feel connected. And I don't even mind his song here, Monsters and Men. It's got the hopeful, we're stronger together vibe that the show needs to end Act 1.
For there are monsters and there are men. There are monsters that live in your head.
It's not the same kind of fun song like we got back at Toy Zone, but it's strong and tends to stick in your head, or at least mine. However, McNamara is sort of the embodiment of what I feel hurts this show the most, and this isn't an issue with how Jeff Blim is acting for him. He's written well, he's performed well. My real issues with McNamara and President Howard don't really show up until later, so I'll wait to discuss them until then. For now, I'd like to reflect on Act 1, which finishes up along with McNamara's song. I think, to put it in a word, I'd describe it as unfocused. All throughout it, up until the final scene, we're getting new characters thrown at us. I mean, just count how many times I've listed characters getting introduced so far in this video. Our focus is spread thin as Tom and Becky don't have much of a plot so far beyond get a Wiggly and escape. Lex wants to run off to Cali, but also vanishes after Feast or Famine. Linda's doing something, but what exactly birthing Wiggly means is still unknown. And now the President and McNamara have established their goal of fight the monster. Act 1 is effectively just setting up a bunch of characters, but not doing anything with them yet. That may be why I like the scene in Toy Zone so much. I'm getting to watch the characters I know do something interesting, rather than being introduced to another important character. There's nothing wrong with ensemble casts, but I find that we end up too scattered with Black Friday. And not in a this is chaos kind of scattered, but more in a this is 5 different stories happening at the same time but that aren't connected kind of way. Luckily, all the important pieces are now in play, and Act 2 gets to start really using them. And while Act 1 tends to start and stop a lot, it's still fun. Watching Tom and Becky reconnect, Hannah, Ethan, and Lex hanging out, and the Oval Office lose their shit is entertaining, despite the show's reluctance to truly get started. And I think that's in no small part to the music and cast. My top 3 songs from the show are in Act 1, and the work of the main leads and the extras across the scenes pull me in and help to keep the audience's engagement high. In short, it's flawed, but it's not bad. Mostly, I just wish I knew what to expect out of the story with the second act approaching, as this engaging cast is so far pretty plotless. Well, Act 2 begins with Deck the Halls of Northfield High School, the in-universe movie Ethan didn't have enough money to get into, which is basically High School Musical but with young Santa.
Ring a ling ding when the bell rings.
This goes on for nearly 4 minutes, and it's a cute enough song, the dancing's good, I like the gags in it, quite frankly it feels like it could be a Disney Channel movie, but I just don't think we needed to spend this long on a joke with no bearing on our practically non-existent plot. If I'm being blunt, the show simply did not have the time to waste on a filler song. It's a fine gag, but I just wish it didn't take this long. As the song finally ends, Tom wakes up after having his stab wound tended to by Becky. The two reconnect and reminisce for a bit before he snaps at her in his conviction to get a toy for Tim. Apologizing, Tom details the car accident that killed his wife, and why that means he has to make it up to his son. Becky, in turn, tells Tom and the audience her backstory, clarifying on the abuse she suffered from her husband that Linda had alluded to earlier, and how Becky ended up killing him in self-defense. This is a tense scene, and Dylan and Kim's performances are next level. These are some amazing performances, powerful and emotional, and that's a good thing too. Tom and Becky haven't done much so far, and Becky especially has been pretty aimless, just sorta tagging along with Tom. Without these stellar performances, this scene could have felt too abrupt. It could have not hit as hard since we haven't gotten to spend much time with these two yet. Kim and Dylan are carrying the scene into the spotlight it deserves, despite their lack of screen time to establish strong characters. Becky continues on to try and help Tom conquer the guilt he feels, which leads us into Take Me Back. It's mostly just the love song that brings the two together. They aren't really the strongest Starkid couple, but this compounded with What Do You Say earlier makes their rekindled relationship believable enough. I do wish the backing music hit a little harder, but that may be my eternal love of power ballads talking. It's a pretty song that helps pull the two up out of their dour attitudes.
Take me back in time. Light my heart and light my shadow. One more night.
If only we had gotten to know Tom and Becky a little bit more before now, it could have really blown us all away. I do like the High School Santa movie cut-in gag, though. While I still feel Deck the Halls took too long, it coming back for this joke was cute. The two start getting freaky, and we go to catch up with the President and McNamara. McNamara explains the dimension beyond other dimensions called the Black and White, where Wiggly resides. McNamara name-drops the mentor that Hannah had hinted at earlier, and then tells Howard that they intend to have him enter the Black and White to try and negotiate with Wiggly. Howard's not particularly excited about this potential suicide mission, but McNamara lays out that they must stop Wiggly's birth. And throughout that whole scene, I can't help but think, cool, where the fuck is Lex? Where's Hannah? Why arbitrarily choose President Howard to go into the portal when we have 4 main characters to pick from? It's a fine scene, driving the plot forward while still bringing the laughs, but it's the beginning of my real issues with Black Friday. Why aren't we spending more time at the store during the Black Friday riot? I'm gonna talk about this more in a little bit. Until then, keep in mind that we still haven't seen Lex since Feast or Famine. We jump back to the mall where Sherman introduces the audience to the mall-goers' newfound religion in Wiggly, a movement pioneered by their mother, Linda. Lex and Frank get pulled out as they've been captured. I wish we got to see some of this. The idea of Linda managing to conscripting the people into her new religion sounds like it could have been a hilarious and/or terrifying scene, and moreover, the capturing of the Toy Zone employees seems kinda important to have known about. Linda demands a doll, or preferably enough for all her children, and kills Frank for not being able to direct her to one. The security guard outs Lex on having stolen a Wiggly and how it is now with her sister in her backpack. Linda demands Hannah get brought to her, and begins to sing Adore Me. Linda's villain song lays out her base desire perfectly. I want to be worshipped. It's fun watching Linda relish in her power, though I wish the song didn't sound so monotone. Just a little bit more oomph with the lyrics would have been nice. The song does, though, have my favorite joke of the whole show, which makes me laugh out loud no matter how many times I see it.
I guarantee I'll destroy everything in my path. Unless I get what I shit, it's Gerald. Hold on. Alright, keep going, just don't say the shit part. That wasn't it. Don't say the shit part.
Unless I get what I shit.
No.
With the song's close, we finally see what Hannah's been up to since she ran off during Ethan's attack. Hiding in the kitty tunnel, Ethan appears, but he's pretty clearly not real, a vision brought on by Wiggly trying to get Hannah to give Linda the doll she's got. And now, I want to take a second to talk about costume design. I really like the costuming in this show. Everyone looks appropriately dressed for the cold weather, each character's outfit is distinct enough to be identifiable at a glance, and without any two people looking too similar. And moreover, the use of color throughout the show rules. If you pay attention, basically everyone in the cast is wearing red and or green. This helps set the Christmas shopping vibe for the show, but is also super smart, as red and green are Wiggly's colors. I'll go into that a little bit later, don't worry, I'll remind you about this when we get there. But for now, just know that the costumes play into the color theme of the show beautifully. And I can't discuss the use of color without talking about Linda's costume. Not only is it just the cutest outfit, perfectly demonstrating her rich bitch personality, but isn't it also perfect that the woman ordained to birth Wiggly from the black and white is exclusively wearing those colors? The only other characters who get close to Linda's black and white design are Ethan and Lex, which makes sense. Ethan's blue jeans offsets the monochrome look, but conveniently, you can only see the top half of the ensemble when Wiggly tries using his image to influence Hannah. Lex's gray shirt tends to pick up the values of lights a lot, looking brown in warm lighting, looking more white in bright lights. Her almost being in black and white helps to hint at her later connection to the dimension, how McNamara helps her use her powers through it. And of course there's Hannah. No one else in the cast wears yellow like this. Hannah's flannel makes her stand out, makes her look like a bit of an outsider, because she is. Her connection with Webby makes her different from the others, and her unique color palette emphasizes that. There's also the fact that Uncle Wily isn't wearing red or green because he's not a shopper or under Wiggly's influence. That Gary's brown suit can look monochrome in the right lighting since he's the most devoted to Linda. It's just all so smartly put together. The costume designs are excellent for this show. Anyway, back to the play, Hannah confronts the Wiggly toy who berates her.
You could have served me willingly, but you're being a rotten little banana. I'm going to have to peel you.
John Madison should look into doing voice acting more. Like, he's by no means a bad stage actor, but during his performance for Wiggly, John feels much more confident behind the mic. He seems to feel more natural when he doesn't have to worry about what his face and body are doing. Fuck, I really hope this doesn't sound like I'm bashing on him. John is a great actor, but I think he has what it takes to be an exceptional voice actor. Tom and Becky find Hannah and fall victim to Wiggly's influence. Hannah runs and hides as the two adults set out to find her as they sing Do You Want to Play? I really like this song. I've already mentioned Kim's excellent vocals earlier, and the overall feel and melody does a great job being a horrific nursery rhyme.
Want some candy, my lovely girl, my lovely girl.
And I really like the idea of watching our heroes fall apart and turn on each other as Wiggly starts to take a toll on them. Unfortunately, I felt this turn in character comes too much out of nowhere with Tom and Becky. The last time we saw the couple, they were banging in the theater, and now suddenly they're under Wiggly's influence and willing to attack a child. I just wish we got to see the two fall into Wiggly's reach before now. Even a short scene of the two hearing him speak would have been nice, because as it is, one could be excused for thinking the two having sex is what got them to start listening to Wiggly and turn evil, since it was the last thing we'd seen them do before now. Either that or watching the High School Santa movie. A really cool scene held back by not quite having enough setup for it. But hey, at least the song does rule. The two catch Hannah, but Becky fucks up and stabs herself with a sedative, putting herself to sleep and pinning Hannah. Tom grabs the doll and runs as Linda's followers find the girls and capture them. Meanwhile, we come back to the president as he gets ready to enter the black and white, and I think now is the moment I can finally talk about the main issue I have with the show. I don't think we should have spent so much time with Howard. In fact, I think he should have been almost excluded from the show. And that sucks to say, cause I really like Kurt Mega's performance as the president, but also, shit dude, I don't care about this half of the plot. We lose out on a ton of time for our main characters to instead spend way too long with the president and McNamara's group. Time spent on what feels like a side character, a member of the supporting cast. Time that could have been spent showing us Linda creating her cult. Time that could have been spent showing us Frank and Lex getting captured by the shoppers. Time that could have been spent showing us Tom and Becky being influenced by Wiggly, and to look ahead in the show, Tom never gets the chance to talk to Tim again. Lex never gets to learn that Ethan died. Lex's powers come out of nowhere. This cast needed more time to develop, and it got spent with the president instead. Like I said, I do like the character of President Howard, but I think the show could have benefited if he wasn't in the second act. I mentioned earlier that I liked the Oval Office scene, and that's still true. I wouldn't want that scene to be removed, but I also don't see why the president was dragged around the plot when McNamara could have just gotten one of our protagonists to go in and talk to Wiggly. Becky gets to handle Linda, Lex helps Tom conquer his guilt, Hannah plays an important role in Linda's plan. Tom doesn't do shit all show. He goes to the store, starts dating Becky again, and then decides to not buy a Wiggly for his son. He doesn't get to play a real role in the real plot. He's just as active a participant as the guy in a hurry, so why not get him to enter the black and white? Why not give him something to do? After meeting with the president, McNamara could go to the mall where it all seemed to have begun. He could bump into Tom and Becky after their adventure in the theater, conscripting Tom to help since he's ex-military. After coming face to face with Wiggly, Tom could be more susceptible to his influence, which would help explain his and Becky's turn for Do You Want to Play? Or Lex could be the one to go in. Escaping the mob, she tries to find her sister, but meets McNamara instead. Recognizing the phrase black and white from what Hannah said earlier, she could offer to go in hopes that it may help Hannah, who clearly had been warned about all this by Webby. That would also mean Lex would have gotten to know McNamara before he shows up later to teach her how to use her powers in the Monsters and Men reprise. We don't need nukes to be McNamara's leverage to try and scare Wiggly away. We don't need the accidental bombing of Moscow to be the thing that throws the world into chaos. The threat of World War III that appears at the end of the show could have simply been due to the actions of people under Wiggly's influence. I like these characters. I want to see their story unfold, and yet we end up spending altogether too much time on an outsider who has no stake in the cult at the mall, stripping our protagonists away from the core plot as they all don't even know that the black and white exists or that Wiggly is a real god. The four of them never get to learn about the central plot, and I just wish that wasn't the case. Anyway, Howard enters the black and white, which is much more green than one would think given its name. Wiley finds Howard, by the way the green apple is such a good prop for him to have, and begins to explain his and Wiggly's plan. The monologue is dedicated to listing a lot of real problems in America these days, from consumerism to the economic turmoil. It's not the funniest monologue, but I think it is an important one. McNamara panics as Howard's signal starts to get lost, and Wiley begins to sing Made in America, a further exploration into the toils of America's economic issues. It's not a subtle message, but also it's really not trying to be. I dig this song a lot, not only the message, but also the angry salesman sound of the song gets your blood pumping. Wiggly as a threat feels more real with Made in America, but there is one problem. During the show's run, the cast was sick. One of the shows had to be cancelled, one of them, Dylan Saunders, couldn't perform, and so Jeff Blim had to take over for him, since he was the only one who knew all of Tom's songs due to being the one who wrote them. And for the most part, you wouldn't know about the cast's struggles with illness by watching the recorded version. But the sickness took the biggest toll on Made in America. I can tell that this song could have been, should have been, another Your Wagon is on Fire.
Your wagon is on fire when you're made in America.
But Joey Richter can't belt like that here because he's trying to not fuck up his voice due to being ill. You can hear it a bit in the Wiggly jingle too.
Rub his belly well, bouncing up and down. Tell him that you love how he wiggles with.
This song just can't give the same sort of impact other loud belts get in other Starkid shows. Most of my complaints for the music in this show have been a lack of power. I'm sure there's a real term for that, but I didn't major in musical theater, so I wouldn't know it. But I think those are similar instances of the actors doing their best to not hurt themselves by straining too hard. I'm glad the cast didn't ruin their vocal cords by pushing themselves too far for the show, but it is a shame that Made in America took a hit for that. The song breaks with the appearance of Wiggly, and holy fuck, I love this. Throughout the whole show, these garlands are on the staircase. You don't suspect a thing, it's just normal Christmas decoration, nothing special. But then having them act as Wiggly's tentacle face with the floodlights being his eyes? Oh, it's so good. It captures the incomprehensible otherness of an eldritch horror. It conveys Wiggly's face so well, making it clear what you're looking at, and by incorporating a constant element of the set, it makes it feel like Wiggly's much closer to winning. Like, now you can see him waiting on the edge of our world. It's such smart set design, I love it. And while we've taken the time to talk about the set, let's also address the excellent lighting. This is the thing I mentioned earlier with the costumes. It's happening now. The thing I said I'd remind you of, here it is. So, just as a blanket statement, the lighting in this show rules. It's dynamic without ever feeling distracting. Normal conversations have chill, flat lighting, but whenever a problem arises, the lights change to fit it. Whenever riots or the cult are being addressed, the lights turn red. A couple of places you can see this is during Feast or Famine, when Ethan gets killed, and most obviously when Linda accepts Wiley's request to become Wiggly's mother. Wiggly, however, is represented with green lighting. Whenever the doll or entity is specifically in play, the green appears. You can tell that Tom and Becky are under his influence before they even try attacking Hannah, because you can see the wiggly green in Tom's hair. These two colors often show up together. A cool moment specifically is during Feast or Famine. As the shoppers begin to hone in on Frank, who has the doll, Frank is illuminated with green light, while the others are in red. They are violent. He has their god. This is what I meant by red and green being the show's colors. The language of the lighting prioritizes colorizing the set in accordance to the current threat, like a musical leitmotif, but in light. And on top of those uses of the colors in the lights, choosing red and green to represent the show is also brilliant. Red means danger. Blood is red. Red can burn you. We are primed to associate red as a warning sign. It's why enemies in video games will usually be coded with this color. Green very rarely appears as a light source, so whenever something is bathed in green light, it looks unnatural. It feels wrong. That's why you see green lighting used a lot in Alien movies. So not only do these colors mean something in the language of visuals, but together they still fit the Christmas theme. Examples like this show and its amazing use of lighting are why I love color theory so much. Back to the show, Wiggly accosts the president with more of John Mattison's stellar voiceover work.
It's going to be my birthday, you know. I wouldn't want to miss out on opening all my presents. I think I'll start with you.
Until McNamara shows up to help. The two escape as Wiley finishes Made in America. However, things are looking grim. Having hurried into the black and white to save Howard, McNamara had no time to don a suit, and so is beginning to deteriorate into the black and white. McNamara seems doomed to succumb to whatever forces are at play in Hatchetfield. He was lost to the Hive in the previous show, and now gets absorbed into Wiggly's domain. I'm interested to see if this pattern continues to the next show. The president makes it back and calls for a nuke to be launched into the black and white, but that, unfortunately, doesn't work. Wiggly sends the bomb to Moscow using a second portal. It seems Howard and the others should have listened to Hannah.
Don't do it. 2 doors, not 1.
How could I have known there was another portal? There was 2 doors, not 1. 2 doors, not 1!
The president panics as World War III now looms on the horizon and is sent away so the military can prepare. This is the last we see of Mr. President and McNamara's team. Sherman holds Lex at box cutter point as he prepares to kill her. Lex tries to bargain with him, offering a handful of discolored pony toys from the store in exchange for her release. Sherman complies and Lex tries to fight back, but it seems Sherman's a more formidable fighter than expected as he begins to choke her. Time freezes as Lex reflects on her life and she starts to sing Black Friday. This song is powerful, mournful. You really get to hear the remorse in her voice as she laments not getting to live life better.
'Cause Friday is black for me. Only my ashes will see the sea.
a gut punch of "I don't want to die yet," which just starts to hurt more when she starts to reminisce on Hannah. Angela does an excellent job here. As she starts to choke, you really feel bad. You want her to escape. And luckily, McNamara shows up again to help save the day. Reaching out through the black and white, McNamara explains that Lex is connected to the dimension, similar to how Hannah is, and encourages her to focus these powers to escape through the Monsters and Men reprise. This is an impactful scene, not only with McNamara being revealed to still be alive-ish in the black and white, but also with Lex's struggle and success to use her newfound power. Though, for a show that likes to drop so many hints about its future events, I wish Lex having powers had been hinted at before now. This reprise of Monsters and Men isn't quite as notable as the first version of the song. It's much shorter and also isn't as powerful, leaning into a more encouraging feel, which is all fine as that fits the mood of the scene much better. There is one final hiccup to the song though, one of the most contentious points of the fans' thoughts on the show: Jeff's falsetto.
Time has run out! What will you do?
I don't think it's doing quite what Jeff thinks it's doing. I find Jeff's falsetto tends to sound sharp, that he may be writing the music outside of his range, and honestly, this isn't even the first instance of this happening. You can usually hear Jeff sticking out a bit during chorus songs. Sometimes this works.
You never should settle for a lifetime that is handed to you. There's always a line to be caught and someone to barrel through. And if you should
Sometimes it doesn't.
He's an underwater creature from out of this world. The bestest friend he went to all the boys and girls.
But I feel it was at its most egregious in The Guy Who Doesn't Like Musicals during What Do You Want, Paul?
But if you can't pin that point that's in the sky, then I want you to want.
I want to make it clear that Jeff is a good vocalist, clearly. Fuck, his other song from earlier is one of my favorites of the show. I just think Jeff needs to reevaluate his use of falsetto, or perhaps simply not assume he can hit such high notes. Regardless, McNamara's encouragement works, as Lex is able to manifest his gun into our world and shoot Sherman before he can kill her. McNamara instructs Lex to wake a warrior of light, it's Becky, to have her kill the prophet, Linda. All of this continues to make me question why the president got involved at all, but there's no time to dwell on that again, as Tom has finally reappeared. Jesus, it feels like it's been forever since we saw him last. Tom has finally found his way to an exit, but is stopped by Lex. Lex confronts Tom on why he's even getting a Wiggly, explaining that kids don't even seem to like the damn thing.
They're all in a fortnight, dude!
And with that, Lex helps Tom truly acknowledge how buying Tim a Wiggly doll won't fix anything. Spending time with him will. As these words sink in, Tom starts If I Fail You, a really beautiful ballad as Tom confronts his actions and reassesses his life, as Tom resolves to dedicate less time to trying to buy his son's happiness, and more time simply being happy with his son.
If I fail you one more time, or if I fail to recognize.
A really notable moment is the return of the Flash from What Tim Wants, but now without the bang, as Tom seems to be learning to handle his PTSD triggers with his newfound acknowledgement that he can't hold himself responsible for his wife's death forever.
And then Flash.
Very cool. I do wish Tom actually got to see Tim again, though. Unfortunately, it wasn't really possible since Kendall needed to be Hannah for the final scenes, meaning Tim couldn't also show up. But that means Tom has to sing his 2 songs to the audience each time, rather than actually getting to tell his son any of this.
Where's Tim?
That aside, it's a great song to round off Tom's arc, as with its conclusion he joins Lex to save them all and the world. Linda's cultists have made it back to their mother. After some more excellent taunting from Linda, she orders a still-asleep Becky to be tossed aside as she takes Hannah's backpack, just to find it empty. Before Linda can hurt the girl, Lex appears, Wiggly doll in hand. As Linda retreats up the stairs to her usual perch, she accosts the girl, but Tom is here too and catches Linda off guard. Lex tries to reason with the cultists and attempts to burn the Wiggly. Linda, with her strong as fuck hands, incapacitates Tom and storms back down, taking the toy. With her eldritch child now in her grasp, Linda begins to sing Wiggle. While Adore Me was more Linda having fun, this song is much more ominous and threatening. She's fully embraced being Wiggly's mother. She's delighted to have won, and with this song, it feels like our heroes may have lost, and that's a very bad thing. While Adore Me is funnier, I find Wiggle to be the far stronger villain song.
Just
Oh, I guess I should talk about the fancy camera work that got me thinking about Black Friday in the first place. It's at its most ambitious during this song, but by now you're so deep into the show that you've been engrossed in the story. You barely notice that the camera follows Linda up the stairs. Honestly, throughout the whole show, the extra camera work doesn't distract like how I'd found it did with Cats. It helps that it's pretty minimal, and whenever it does show up, it feels warranted. It also helps that they're still using the live audio, and that even for reshoots they did, they still got an audience to come watch. The only real problem is that it sometimes leads to keeping background choreography off screen. If they could just make sure to remember to keep a decent chunk of the stage on screen during group choreo sections, then there'd be no problem. If the Lang brothers want to be more dynamic with their camera work, they seem to know how to do that without taking the audience out of the experience. Honestly, I find the after effects far more distracting. They're clearly done in post and make me realize, oh yeah, I'm watching a video, pulling me out of the experience a bit. These aren't anything new to Starkid, but Black Friday's more serious tone made it stand out a bit more. Anyway, the Carol of the Bells melody being used with the cultists during Wiggle is also excellent.
When Wiggly comes, 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 when Wiggly comes.
A horrifying Christmas Carol is exactly what the show needed, and it rules. The small dance break is also pretty sick. As Linda and her cultists finish their song, Becky appears atop the stairs. I guess Tom and Lex woke her up? She's got the gun, but that doesn't seem to bother Linda, who continues to insult her. Looks like being Wiggly's mother doesn't make you immune to bullets, though, as Becky one-shots Linda. I feel like this is a pretty abrupt end to our main villain. I guess I just wish there was, more of a fight? I don't know, it's just a little sudden to have her get glocked 30 seconds after finishing her "We're about to win" victory song. Maybe Tom and Lex could have showed up to fight off the other shoppers to help Becky get a clearer shot of Linda. Regardless, with Linda's death, the cultists mourn the loss of their mother, and Gary Goldstein, attorney at law, carries her out to the car to discuss her will with her husband. Tom and the sisters reappear, and Lex succeeds in lighting up the Wiggly doll. The cultists in the mall burn. Our four heroes look on as Paul and Emma show up in search of Tom. Tim is waiting in the car. Seems the town's still in chaos, and the nuking from earlier has the whole world following suit. Tom suggests he and Emma talk about her late sister when the world isn't on fire anymore. The show then drops a lot of references to the guy who didn't like musicals. These are fine, technically, though I felt they weren't really all that necessary. Really, the big issue is the audience going apeshit over a not even that good joke just because it's a quote from the previous show.
What am I supposed to do without my iPhone?
Wear a watch?
Like, guys, calm down. The Star Kids aren't gonna be your friends because you liked their other shows, okay? Tom mentions that it's 11:57 and that Black Friday is almost over. The ominous ticking that opened the show starts up again as Tom comments that if they can survive today, they can survive anything. With a horrified look on her face, Hannah starts to sing "What If Tomorrow Comes?" Another haunting Christmas Carol-like song, implying that surviving until tomorrow is a much bigger deal than Tom's statement may have originally implied. Kendall's singing is so good.
Tomorrow will come, tomorrow won't come, tomorrow come today.
Now, here's something of note. If this is your first Starkid show, you may be interested in the extras that file in during the song. They sure don't look familiar. Well, they look familiar to me. These are characters from The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, and I have to sit here and wonder why the decision was made to end the show with a different cast of characters instead of just ending it with this show's characters. Admittedly, everyone else has died, so them showing up for this song may have been contradictory to the story, but I just don't see why overshadow your current characters with fan service of your previous show's characters. I like The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals. It's my favorite Starkid show, but I want to get the chance to like Black Friday and its characters too. But the show seems determined to hang off of references of Starkid's previous success, rather than let it stand on its own. From bookending the show with a different show's cast of characters, to featuring a fan favorite to be a hero who saves the day multiple times, Black Friday seems more interested in acknowledging its predecessor than developing itself. Hell, even the extended Deck the Halls with High School Santicle feels like it's trying to redo the gag of a pitch for a different musical inside this one that we saw last time with the fan-favorite show Stop and Number and Workin' Boys. I wish Black Friday had the respect for itself that it needed to prompt respect for it out of the fans. as it too often feels like being a fan of the guy who didn't like musicals is a prerequisite to getting to enjoy Black Friday to its fullest.
Is that an iPhone?
Yeah, it's 6S. I've had...
Wear a watch!
You don't need to see the previous show to understand this one's plot, but if you want to get all the in-jokes and references, you do. Anyway, as the song goes on, we unfortunately don't get to see the choreography happening around the vocalist, as the camera focuses only on whoever is singing. This is honestly the worst example of the ambitious camera work not letting us see everything we should. As the song ends, everyone huddles around Tom as he and the others count down the seconds until Black Friday ends. Something can be heard flying overhead as the lights go out and the show ends.
3.
2.
What if tomorrow?
The show's ambiguous ending has a lot of fans speculating. Was that a Russian plane dropping a nuke on them in turn? Was it the meteor crashing and causing the events of the guy who didn't like musicals? Unfortunately for now, there's no concrete answer, though I'm sure as other shows in the series come out, the pieces of the puzzle will come together. A statement that encompasses the whole show of Black Friday, in a way. The guy who didn't like musicals was the first in the series, but wasn't necessarily made with the series in mind. It could have been a standalone show, but with Black Friday's inception, the decision to make the Hatchetfield series had been finalized, meaning Black Friday is the one who has to do the heavy lifting in terms of establishing lore, setting up events for future shows, and retroactively expanding on the guy who didn't like musicals. This is probably why we spend so much time with the President and Peep. These are factors that need to happen to facilitate stories down the line of the Hatchetfield cinematic universe. I have no doubt in my mind Black Friday will get better with age. As more shows in the series come out, they'll be able to call back to Black Friday and build up its narrative supplementally. Webby, Wiggly, and the Black and White have a very good chance of showing up again, and whenever they do, Black Friday gets a sort of DLC bonus to its story and characters. Unfortunately, on its own, Black Friday doesn't get to benefit from that. Without more Hatchetfield stories supporting Black Friday, the show ends up feeling like two halves of different shows. One that's about shoppers on Black Friday who start to riot and form a cult, and one about the President and the super secret mystery gang entering a different dimension. I like what we saw from both of these halves, but I also wish we got to see the full version of both of those stories. I've already talked about how the core cast can feel underdeveloped, that important moments with them tend to get glossed over or come out of nowhere, but honestly the same applies to President Howard. We don't really get to know anything about him before he gets conscripted into the plot, and then he gets no conclusion. He accidentally starts a war and then gets shuttled away. No arc, no resolution. He just exists for a bit. Both of these two half shows end up suffering by trying to share the same stage. A stage that was already full to burst without the President's plot. I struggle to figure out who the main character is here. It's an ensemble. Tom, Becky, Lex, and Hannah all play primary roles, but who should be considered the lead? My first inclination is to say Tom. He gets the first character song of the show and is the first member of the core cast we see on stage. We follow him to the mall, we get introduced to both Lex and Becky through him. He is the one who leads us into the closing seconds of the show, and yet I'm hard-pressed to say Tom did anything of note. Like I mentioned earlier, he really doesn't get to do much in regards to the plot. His personal arc is handled well, with him learning to focus more on Tim and less on buying him things, but he does next to nothing when it comes to the cult, Wiggly, or Linda. He points a gun at Linda and then gets pushed away. That's it. If Tom is going to play such an important role in the show, then I wish he'd actually been a part of it. It's why I find myself unhappy with Howard getting to do the important dimension hopping. Tom desperately needed the chance to get involved more. Even without removing the President, letting him do more in taking down Linda and the cult would have been nice. On a similar note, Becky feels even less developed. She has no goal to strive towards. She has no arc to follow. She finally stands up to her bully Linda, but we already knew she was capable of that because she'd done a similar thing to her husband. I appreciate that Becky gets to play a bigger part than just being Tom's new main squeeze. I just wish she was given something of worth to do before headshotting Linda. She spends a decent chunk of her stage time either being evil or asleep, and most of the time before those events are just her being there but not being the focus. Letting Tom play more in relation to the main Wiggly plot, and letting Becky be more of a character beforehand, could have helped these two out immensely. Arguably, I'd say the real main lead I'm looking for is Lex. Not only is she the only one left alive with a real connection to the plot-sensitive Hannah, but she grows as a character by not only solidifying her resolve to live a better, happier life, but also by unlocking her powers. Lex is what gets Tom to finish his arc, she's the one to burn down the Wiggly doll and cult, and yet I feel she's barely in the show. We don't even see Lex until we're 15 minutes into the show, and she keeps disappearing for huge chunks of time. After Feast or Famine, 38 minutes go by without knowing what's happened to her or Frank at all, as we spend that time instead with the President and Tom and Becky's backstories. After we catch up with her, another 20 minutes go by before we check in on her again. There are a lot of elements at play during this show. Of course, some things and some characters aren't going to get as much screen time as others. I don't see why our main hero is one of the ones to get pushed aside for so much of it. I wanted the chance to care about Lex as a character before she got her powers, instead of just cared about how cute she was with Ethan. Which is another glaring element in the show, the fact that Lex never gets to mourn her boyfriend or even learn about his death on stage is befuddling. Like, if you kill a character, that should make an impact on the other characters. Why was Ethan killed off or even there in the first place? Was it just for the audience to be sad? Because that's not economical storytelling, that's cheap. Yeah, it's sad that the character died, I liked him well enough, but it didn't do anything. Ethan simply running away from them all would have resulted in the exact same story playing out. If you're gonna kill a character, you should do it for a reason, and that reason should make an impact on the other characters. Fuck, Tom and Becky actually get to see his death, and they barely react. They're just like, uh-oh, this riot is bad. Ethan's death could have been replaced with any background character dying instead for all it did to the plot. And a simple solution to this would be to just have your cast interact more. Our four main characters never really get the chance to talk. The characters tend to stay in groups, which to a degree makes sense, but I feel keeping the three main stories so separated added to the disjointed, unfocused feel of the show. Becky never interacts with Lex. Hannah gets attacked by the adults, and then just accepts them during the finale without interacting with them afterward. Lex and Tom only speak twice, once during her introductory scene, and then again when she tells him Tim doesn't want a Wiggly. Why don't these two get to build a rapport throughout the show? Why does Tom have to stay stapled to Becky for the whole thing? Speaking honestly, I think removing Becky could have helped avoid this, allowing Tom to instead team up with Lex as they help each other grow while trying to save Lex's sister and maybe get a Wiggly doll would have alleviated most of my issues. It would force Tom to do more with the plot since Becky wouldn't be there to get the kill shot, and it would allow us to get to know Lex before she unlocks her powers. Giving Tom a new love interest doesn't really feel like a necessary element to the story, and saying all that really sucks, cause similar to how I like Kurt Mega's performance for the President, I really like Kim Whalen as Becky. I wouldn't want to lose her, to miss out on her jaw-dropping acting and singing. I wouldn't want to lose What Do You Say and Take Me Back. Nick and Matt Lang are good at making likable characters, and they have great actors portraying them. But I think moreover than all that, I think the second act needed to be focused down a bit more. The first act, while kinda slow, feels more well thought out. I get the impression the Langs didn't know how exactly they wanted the show to end when they started writing, which is fine, but I think the conclusion they decided on could have benefited from more revisions. I think it's telling that I find myself coming back to the Toy Zone scene the most. I like the ending of the show, I really like the beginning of it, but I struggle with enjoying the middle of it. From Jingle Jangle Santa School to Sherman choking out Lex, I keep finding myself wishing we were spending less time with some things and more time elsewhere. I love the Lovecraftian horror of Wiggly, I want to see more of McNamara's efforts to save the world, but I also wanted all of that to correlate with the plot set up with the mall-goers on a Black Friday. I wish Black Friday wasn't so caught up in setting up deep lore for future shows and trying to reference the guy who didn't like musicals so much. I liked the previous show, but I like this one too. I want the chance to like Black Friday as much as I like the guy who didn't like musicals, without the show feeling the need to rely on reusing elements from its predecessor. Despite how I feel the show struggles to have a strong middle, I do think it's a fun show, at least worth checking out for the songs. Its lack of focus on important characters left me disappointed, but the overall world of Black Friday entices and fascinates me. I'm excited to see more shows in the Hatchetfield series, to see how they can call back to Black Friday and expand its lore. There are a lot of questions still left unanswered by the end of the show. How are Paul and Emma okay when they were victims of the Hive in the last show? What exactly is Webby? Are there more people connected to the Black and White? What happened to the survivors at the end of the show here? These are interesting things to speculate on, and I trust Starkid's writing to answer them satisfyingly. This is not the first time Starkid has been overambitious with their plot for a show, but I'm hoping that they can learn to narrow their focus down a bit more for following musicals, now that they don't have to do the important lore establishment that Black Friday was tasked with. I said earlier that I feel Black Friday will age well, that it will provide a more entertaining product with the support of its predecessors. I really do hope that's true, because I'm ready to love Black Friday now, we just didn't get enough of it to warrant that yet. I suppose I wanted more isn't the worst complaint to have for a show, and I'm excited to see what that more has in store for us. Until then, though, it may be a little rough, it may have its fair share of flaws, but I do still enjoy the Black Friday we have for now. If we can appreciate this, then we'll be able to appreciate it so much more once the time finally comes.